Thanks everyone for joining. My name is Saurabh Gupta, and we are very glad to be on this call. We are thankful for the organizers on the Trailblazer community to organize this. And we are going to be talking about how you can enable your Salesforce with your Pardot to do more than what typically customers are able to do in terms of enabling it for omni-channel marketing and extending your Pardot and Salesforce solution to other areas such as SMS and social and such, and how you can do this while being considerate of the preferences that your subscribers have, and also while complying with the data privacy regulations. All right, so let's start with a disclaimer. This is not legal advice. We are not a law firm. We don't represent Salesforce's point of view. We are a Salesforce ISV partner, but this is just our perspective on how to address some of the areas around data privacy and marketing enablement when you think about Salesforce and Pardot. You can learn more about us on our website, cloudcompliance.app. And thank you for joining us. We're also very thankful to our customers, some of who you see listed here. And you can see a lot more on our website and a lot of detail on some of the areas that we're going to be talking about. So our agenda today is to talk about the challenges around omni-channel marketing. What are some of the new trends and new challenges that are coming because of COVID and the whole digital transformation that has been accelerated because of it? What are some of the requirements from data privacy regulation perspective? So whether it's GDPR or CCPA or India's PDPB, which is still in, going through approval processes. And then we will talk a little bit about how can you effectively help your company or your clients market across all of these channels with consent and preference management, and how can you enable a privacy center? Also talk a little bit about a data management perspective on it, show a bit of a demo of the real thing of how this looks from an end customer perspective, and point you to some resources. And as you have questions, please feel free to type them in or interrupt us, and we'll take them on wherever we are. So just raise your questions as they come along. So let's start with the marketing challenges for 2020 and 2021. Obviously, the big theme from last year that unfortunately continues on now is COVID. And what we also see is that has led to an acceleration in more digital, right? We are ordering more online. We are just going very, very digital. And that brings a whole slew of needs around personalization of omni-channel marketing. As technologists, the challenge that we see is that every organization is struggling with having so many different tools. You've got Pardot for email. You may have, an SMS technology, SMS 360, Mowgli, Twilio, something else. You may have other social channels. And on top of it, there are new and existing data privacy laws that are constantly requiring technologists and marketeers to ensure that their organizations are compliant with these regulations. So the challenge from a Salesforce and Pardot perspective is that the customer experience is different, right? You have the opportunity to do nothing, unfortunately, and just leave it as is today, so that your email just has an unsubscribe link. And when people don't like, if they think it's irrelevant content, they just click the unsubscribe link and they just decide to unsubscribe it. You also have the option of enabling more than that. You have the option, which is kind of what we are going to show and talk about, of enabling a preference management ability. And what that does is it allows your subscribers to have a middle ground, so they can choose what kind of emails or other messages they would like to receive from your organization. and they can opt out of the ones that they don't care about and are not useful for them. So the challenge for Salesforce and Pardot is if you don't do anything and just use them out of the box, you have subscribe, unsubscribe information, and it is locked in Powerdot. So what that means is if I connect my Salesforce to some SMS technology, that does not have these subscribe, unsubscribe preference. So I don't really, you may have unsubscribed my email, but if I have your phone number, I may still be sending you SMS because this centralization of opt-in, opt-out consent has not happened. This becomes really hard to maintain as your number of marketing tools increase, because every tool manages its own opt-in, opt-outs, and they're not really centralized in your Salesforce. So the whole idea of a consolidated customer relationship management and having a holistic view of us, of your customer, is kind of lost because all these little tools have their own version of it. In addition to that, there is also data privacy requirements. So privacy laws such as Europe's GDPR, California's CCPA, and America has now 2 other states, Virginia and Colorado, that have privacy laws. Brazil's LGPD, India's PDPB, which is in the process of going through government approvals, and a number of other regulations have requirements around opt-in, opt-outs. And really at the basis of all of these laws, is the idea that a number of businesses are required to treat personal data fairly, transparently, and lawfully. And what that means is that we have to treat everybody's personal data with respect as businesses. And this also applies to nonprofits, depending on where you're, whose data you're processing. But whether it's the information of leads of your customers, consumers, prospects, employees, partners, or anybody else, there are specific requirements of how we collect this information, what we can do with this information, and how we can utilize this information in our marketing outreach. Individuals now have specific rights under all of these laws, and we have to make sure that our solutions have the appropriate tooling to honor those rights. If we don't do that, there are monetary penalties. They can be quite significant, particularly under the GDPR and some of these other regulations. And these regulations are cross-border enforced. So you may be a company in India, which is, like maybe doing BPO type work, right? And your customers may be in Europe, whose data you're handling. But for those European residents, you're obligated to comply with GDPR. You may go, well, we don't have any branch in Europe. We are 100% based in India. It doesn't matter. The European authorities can fine an India-only entity if they're not complying with the Europe's GDPR, which is a significant difference from a lot of other laws, which are only residentially based on the country of, where you're headquartered. In addition to this, a number of companies also want to do it because it's a good way to build customer trust and maintain it. So that's kind of what is driving a lot of these, in addition to all the other requirements from a technology and business perspective. I'm going to take a pause and look at all the comments and see if there is a specific question around this. All right. Okay, so nothing here. So I'm going to keep going. If there are any questions, please interrupt and please stop us and let us know, and we'll be happy to answer those. So let's talk a little bit about consent and communication preferences. Salesforce has actually added a number of objects in the last 3.5 years around consent and communication preferences, primarily driven by GDPR, which was one of the earliest data privacy laws, and then to support all these other regulations. So you may have heard of the individual object in Salesforce. There is also a contact point type consent object, which can manage all of the consents, the opt-in, opt-out, like each one of them as a record. And the idea is that by using these and a number of other, there are like 15 plus objects now in Salesforce around this. So they exist in your org today. So if you go in your org and the object, manager, and you can look up individual, contact point type consent, individual authorization form objects, subscription objects. There is a number of objects. It's a very rich form mod, very rich object model that Salesforce has offered. And the idea is you can manage very granular opt-in, opt-outs or consents. So you can, I can, as a subscriber, I can indicate my preferences and say, it's okay for, your company to send me customer support emails or SMS for customer support, but it's not okay for your company to send me marketing SMS. You can probably send me marketing emails, things like that. So you can go very, very granular on this by the purpose, such as marketing, customer service, sales, newsletter, and also by channel, email, SMS, social, and so on. And we'll see a little bit more in a few minutes here. This particular object, contact point type consent, is one of the key ones. And it also allows us to have a very comprehensive information on the consent. And this is important because typically what we used to see in the past is people would just put like a few checkboxes, do not call, do not email, something, but there is no auditability in that. Because these are legal requirements, it is very useful to have an audit of when a consent was obtained, how long it is valid for. Just because someone said, sure, send me your newsletter after these privacy laws, it doesn't mean that we can, keep on sending them emails for the next 50 years. The consents that we obtain today need to be for a specific period, after which we either need to get a new consent or expire them and stop emailing people or outreaching, people. The third part of this is, in certain scenarios, you may be able to default them, but in a number of cases, you need to explicitly ask for these consents, on the lead form. It really depends on what you're doing. For example, if someone said, reach out to me for, I want a quote on your product, right? You're a consulting company. I'm like, hey, reach out to me. I'd like to have a meeting, or I'd like a quote. You can, maybe default that for, as a way to reach out to that person to address their inquiry. But you cannot default that as they are signing up for your newsletter. That you have to explicitly ask for. And these, as I mentioned earlier, you want to have a record of this. So I may have opted in January of 2021, and then in April, I opted out. So you want to have a record which shows that Saurabh was opted in from Jan to April, and that's why you were emailing him. And then, from April onwards, you opted out. So we automatically removed it from our Pardot campaigns. And now we are not sending any email to Saurabh. So how does this look like? An informed consent experience covers all of these things. When someone signs up on your website, or for a webinar like this or anything, then they are signed, you present them consents, and I'll show you an example in a minute. And that consent and the privacy terms, that user experience should be thought through. You want it to be very simple and easy for subscribers to understand, so that they can give you the permission or refuse it. Once someone acknowledges and says, once they opt in, you need to be able to manage those inside Salesforce. And then from there, you need to be able to make sure that your Pardot and your SMS and your social, all of those channels are able to utilize those consent preferences in all of your communication. So you give a very integrated omni-channel experience. And then you also offer a self-service ability where someone who doesn't like what they're getting, or if they want to change their consent and they want to get more, e-communication from you or for specific purposes, they're able to do it themselves. What you're trying to do is you're trying to offer transparency to your subscribers. You're also giving them the ability to personalize what kind of things they want to hear from your organization. And you want to do it at scale so that it is seamless and, it enables self-service. I'm going to take another look here. Okay, there's nothing new. All right, I'm going to keep moving. So what does that look like from a process perspective? You ask for permission, you automate the creation of consent, you share those consents across Pardot and other channels that you may have. And then you make sure that people are able to update them via self-service and keep this, close this loop. So what we have done, and we'll show you an example in a minute for our customers, is that our product, Cloud Compliance, actually automates all of this. And the way it works is, we automate creation of consent, creation of individual records inside Salesforce, matching them with contact, lead, all of that. So everything is managed and maintained inside Salesforce. And we automate this. So if you are creating new leads, if you have a lead registration form, whether it's on Pardot or your website or wherever, when those leads come into Salesforce, excuse me, we can automate the creation of consents around it. And then what we do is, for things that your subscriber has opted in, we synchronize those opt-in dates to Pardot and to other tools if you use multiple tools connected with your Salesforce. It may be other app exchange apps, common SMS apps like SMS 360, SMS Magic, Mowgli, Twilio, etc. And even to other social media integration, if you're doing anything with WhatsApp, LinkedIn, and things like that. And then once someone needs to manage their consent, we offer a privacy portal like a preference center that they can go to, and that is running on top of Salesforce Communities. And we can actually do that with the free version of Community. So you don't need to buy a license for everyone who wants to manage their consents. So this is an example of a consent form, right? Like you can see on this one, it's very simple. It tells you, hey, this is how our service works. Here's a link for terms and conditions. And in the bottom, they're clearly asking, can we send you, these kind of coupons for marketing and through all of these other ways? And you can get it very, very granular. You can ask for more details also, depending on, where you're collecting these. In certain countries, you may need to have a double opt-in. So when someone says a yes here, and when they get into Salesforce, you may need to sometimes send another email to let them know that this is what, what they've consented for, and they may even need to kind of agree one more time. So, but what you see here is that there is a clear and explicit ask for their consent. Once they give the consent, this information that gets pushed into Salesforce, you may have web to lead, or you may be importing it from your, some other lead gen system. And when they come here, what you see on this screenshot here are all of the opt-in and opt-outs, right? Each one of those little, pill that you see at the bottom, the green opt-ins and the red opt-out, each one of them actually is a record underneath it of type contact point type consent. And we can then ensure that these consents are used for Pardot and other marketing outreach. What this does is this granular, ability to manage consent respects preferences across apps, channels, and things like that. It also allows your marketing to and customer support and other groups to select the most effective channel. So if I opted in for email and SMS, you can decide that, well, for a particular thing, we may want to use the email channel. For others, SMS is more effective. And since Saurabh here is, opted in for both email and SMS on customer support, as you see at the very bottom there, then, in this case, we may decide, well, Saurabh made a request. Let's say you're a bank, and you may go, hey, your statement is available. And that is an email because Saurabh opted in. And then you may go, well, you know what, you just deposited a check and we accepted it, or it got rejected. And that I may send you as an SMS. So you have the ability to granularly use this information and define a better customer experience. And what this is doing is it gives you that single view of what your customers are okay and not okay with. And you can leverage this not only across your CRM, but also from an e-commerce perspective for all the omni-channel marketing and so on. Is there any question on this so far? Is anybody on the call doing consent management today? No? You guys can hear me all right, correct? I'm going to look up on the chat. All right, so Tunji has a question. For customers who aren't sure of which consent to give, does CC have recommendation options? So great question, Tunji. So this is kind of a slippery slope. Certain regulations, particularly the GDPR, prohibit companies from, like automatically checking checkboxes. So by default, when we are asking for consent, we can't have the box checked. So, this is something that we don't typically do or recommend. I'll show you an example. I want to go back to my last slide. So see where it says contact permission, yes, please, and no, thanks. The reason both of them are blank is because this organization wants to explicitly ask for that. They cannot recommend. By recommending like a yes or a no, you can run into trouble. That is not acceptable. But typically lead gen forms are, like you have a lot of flexibility on what you want to do there. If it is appropriate for a company to pre-default something or recommend something, then they can do it on a lead gen form. So that part is not really in from a cloud compliance Salesforce perspective. Typically, if you're creating a lead to, a web to lead form, and let's say it's running on Salesforce or on your website or wherever, you can choose to show more information, or if the law allows, wherever you're collecting this data, then you can pre-default it. But typically, pre-defaulting for consents is usually a no-no. All right. So let's look at how this looks when it comes into Pardot. So you registered, I went to a website, attended this webinar, I registered, and you got my information in Salesforce. From Salesforce, we synced it to Pardot, and then Pardot sends out an email. And on that Pardot email, what you can see here is an example of how elegantly, you can incorporate both unsubscribe as well as opt down or manage subscription. So the blue, the second blue circle here, want less email, go here. When you click this can take you to like a manage preference page where you can decide what particular kind of emails you want or don't want. And so this serves as a middle ground so that people are not just clicking unsubscribe and just going away completely. This works really well because now you're able to centrally manage these preferences inside Salesforce instead of limiting them to just say Powerdot, right? And based on those opt-in or opt-out, you can automate this campaign membership in Pardot. You can leverage Pardot's automation. And for anybody who opts out, we can dynamically remove them from Pardot so that when the next email on that specific subject goes out, we don't reach out to people who don't want to get those emails. So this is a self-service link that we generate in Salesforce and push it down to Pardot, and then you can embed it in your Pardot template. And that way, everyone gets their own unique self-service management link, and they can go to the preference center and manage their consent preferences. Let me see if there's another question here. Okay. All right, moving on. So here is an example of using that with like an SMS technology. So if you have a number of App Exchange solutions just work directly off Salesforce, and this is an example screenshot of Mowgli. And if you're going to create something like that, particularly with like a process builder or a flow or something, because you have access to this information inside Salesforce, since we are using, Salesforce objects, you can leverage that consent in your SMS. You can also leverage it for WhatsApp or other channels if you're using those. And once someone clicks on the link to manage their preferences, they get this page. So this is an example of this communication preference page that we generate. What you see here is, this person is opted in for a number of sales related things. and they just opted out for anything related to survey. And what you see here are, these are the channels. So phone, social, email, and all of these are dynamic. So you can add your own specific channels. You may go phone, WhatsApp, Facebook, LinkedIn, SMS, right? And these are also data driven. So these are really records in Salesforce, which we use to dynamically generate this, this matrix. So this, what you see here is basically a Lightning component that is looking at a number of different things to dynamically generate this. So you can continue to add more granular purposes in addition to sales, survey, and whatever. You can update these system preferences, and we leverage all of these and show you a screen that gets generated and is running on top of communities. So this makes preference management easy. There's no password involved here. It's using Salesforce communities. And it also takes care of the issue, which is that most marketing tools don't really sync back their communication preferences to Salesforce. We eliminate that because when someone says they want to manage preference, the link we are sending them is actually a communities page, and anything they do there directly updates Salesforce, and that way it kind of pushes down to those tools. As I mentioned, we use the free version, so you don't have to buy login licenses for communities to do this. So basically what this is really doing is, it's taking your Salesforce org, which now is enabled in addition to Pardot emails. You can now connect it to SMS, social, phone, all of these. You can manage all of those preferences, and you are basically in charge. And we are like this little, R2D2 here. We're like this little robot kind of helping automate a lot of this consent management for you, so that you don't have to figure out and write triggers or do other kind of workarounds and manage it across all of those channels. This is an example of a customer of ours, EF Education First. They are based in UK, and they do their preference management for Salesforce and Powerdot with our product. And they have they have privacy policies in multiple language across multiple regions. They also integrate these preferences for their mobile app. So, they're in the education business. So for their students, they send class reminder, other kind of notification, and all of those preferences in their mobile app. And someone says, send me these reminders or don't send me these reminders. They're basically making a call to our REST API, which is running on top of Salesforce. And, they're basically saying, hey, Saurabh said, send him a reminder, or don't send him a reminder for this purpose. And we store those preferences, and then we push it to Pardot, we push it to, I think, their SMS provider, and they leverage those when they are sending those reminders. They also use it for in-app notification in their mobile app. I'm going to take a quick look at the chat. I think there is some comment there. Give me just a sec. Can we use this in Marketing Cloud? Absolutely, Anish. As Aniket responded, yeah, we can use this across any marketing technology that can integrate with Salesforce and has access to contact and lead object. We can utilize with those. If you have, Anish, a more specific question or a particular kind of use case, we are happy to cover in this call. So definitely either unmute yourself or just type here, and we can add more information, context to it. All right, so here is an App Exchange customer spotlight that Salesforce did for them, for our customer. And you can see that they were able to really quickly do this. We spent, I think, I don't know, about 4 to 6 weeks with them. And that was basically because they wanted to integrate it with their own custom mobile app in addition to Pardot integration. Typically, Pardot integration for us is like a 3-week implementation project. And our professional services team does all the heavy lifting for it. We understand customer requirement and configure this. And then we work with them to help integrate this with Marketing Cloud or Pardot or Marketo, Eloqua, MailChimp, whatever you have. We internally use MailChimp, and we follow this exact same architecture that we just showed you, and we use our product to do that too. So with that, I'm going to switch it to Aniket. Aniket, are you able to show us a demo really quickly of this and walk through of how this works? Hey, Aniket. I can't hear you.
Yeah, you can just enable the sharing.
Yes, I think I just did. Yeah, you should be able to share your screen.
Give me a second. Hey everyone, this is Aniket. I'm the product manager for cloud compliance. I'm based out of Mumbai. And thanks everyone for joining on to this link in the last moment since we had some glitch, but it's all good now. I hope you can see my screen. Hey Saurabh, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Cool. Let me see. Move this here. Okay. So first of all, thanks Saurabh for giving the detailed information about omni-channel marketing and its importance with Salesforce plus Pardot. So as we know now, we have learned the importance of it. Let me show basically how does this looks in Pardot and Salesforce. So basically, you can see here this is a little consent center in the Salesforce right now. And I'm going to show you that how can you manage consents in Salesforce while you're operating from a Pardot. Like you have a Pardot disguised prospect, Aniket, and how can he give his consents from Pardot itself, which will be managed completely under Salesforce. So I'm going to show you more about Pardot in the later part of this demo. Let me just quickly show you what is the consent, how the consent looks like in Salesforce. As you can see on the screen, why we are first of all using consent whole architecture on Salesforce, because as Saurabh mentioned, it's a very rich architecture which Salesforce has built, and it really makes good sense to use that instead of a typical Pardot's preference center or a privacy center, what they call, like a simple checkboxes which they have. So instead of that, why this is a rich architecture is because on the behind of the scenes, if you can see all these consents, like for example, this is an informer newsletter via email. So you can see there is an opt-in given, which is basically captured in a date form and not a checkbox. So quickly to show you, this is a Salesforce standard object, which our product uses on top of it. And the reason is because using of standard objects will help you, not consuming your storage space because you'll have a lot of records. So here you can see that this particular consent purpose is maintained on a date form. And this is one of the advantage of using Salesforce rather than any other email marketing tool, be it Pardot, Marketing Cloud, or anywhere. So one is that, and second is that Salesforce always keeps these consents on an individual level. So if you see here, individual is a standard object in Salesforce. And what our product does is, even if you are a lead, we make sure you to add as an individual, and not only add you as an individual, we also make sure that if this Aniket Save is there as a lead or as a contact with corresponding to a match key, say email, if it has a common email, a common match key, we make sure to add you to one individual. So the advantage is that now your consents are unified to one particular individual, one record. So even if you have like two leads or one contact spread out because you have not done a due duplication or something, you don't need to worry because consents will get managed at this level. So that is one more advantage of using the whole Salesforce architecture. And cloud compliance helps you to create these individuals and group them together automatically. It's all automatically schedulable so that you, even if you have like millions of records, you're good to go with it. So that is one of the reasons we are using Salesforce as a consent architecture. And to show you how our product is going to help you to manage these consents from Pardot, is that basically we have two type of consent data here. One is the dates which you have seen, and I'll show you how it looks. So for example, informer newsletter email, as you see, it's an opt-in. What we do is typically we propagate these data from the consent, these object, which is for consent, to your lead or contact. So you can see now you have a date which is coming in. So this is the one type of consent data. which is going to help you that, once it goes into Pardot, I'll show you how it looks and what are the advantage of it. Like you can, like Saurabh was saying, you can create dynamic list in Pardot based on the dates, and you can pull this guy to an email list, which I'll be showing it to you. And the second type of consent data which we do is our product is we generate a link. This link is going to basically help Aniket as a prospect in Pardot. He's going to give his consent on his own, which is running on community, which is a site guest user, so that you don't need a community license for it. But on the background, it's a force.com platform, which we're doing it. And I'll be showing you to that also, that how does the consents he's going to give it. So these are the two type of basic consent data which we are doing on your you can say email marketing friendly objects like lead and contact. So they are available on both of them. Any questions still here if you have, please, or else I can proceed further. Cool. I'll proceed further with that. So as you saw that we got email fields and our URL field here. Now let me quickly show you a corresponding record in Pardot, a prospect. So since this was already synced in past Pardot, we already have the email date field. And as you saw that, let me quickly also show you and how does this work. Say example, you have another consent purpose, which is informal newsletter via phone, and that's missing. And suppose you get a call from your prospect that they need to give a opt-in for this. So you simply just need to go here and give a consent to this guy saying 3 years, or you can extend it for 5 years. This is the consent date. And all it does is basically now, if I just refresh the screen, okay, let's see. We're going to see that the new consent purpose, which was there, you're going to get a date for that also. So now if you see informal newsletter phone, we also have a date. And since your sync to Pardot is happening behind the scene, or you can do it manually, you're going to get these dates data in the Pardot, this guy. Let me go back and refresh. So this is the guy who was we had synced. And now if you see, now we also have a date for another consent purpose. So based on your type of consents, like how Anish was asking, do we recommend, but usually companies define their own. Based on those, you can create dynamic list. And why do we create a list? So that we need to pull this guy, because he has given opt-in, you need to pull this guy to a certain list to fire some emails. And that is the whole purpose of, email marketing, MarTech, right? So based on these dates, you can very simply create in Pardot some dynamic list. Like I have created this one of this for, if you see in former email one, and which will have a very simple rule for usually consents opted in, you can keep the date in future, so that if that opted in date is in future, this guy is going to get pulled in this list and you can fire emails. So that's how you can see that in this particular informer email, we can see this guy already there sitting in. And based on that, the second consent data type, which we were propagating to Pardot, is this, which I was talking about, a link, so that we want this prospect to also give his own consents. Like you can maintain these consents here, that's good, but it would be even better that if this guy himself can give his consent, whether he wants to opt in the future or he wants to opt out. So that is why we send this link, which you saw on Salesforce. And once you have this in Pardot, you can just simply put it in your hyperlink in your footer section of anywhere, because since that's a dynamic one, you're going to fire the emails to these guys and they're going to get their own link, which you saw on the Salesforce, this one. And I'm going to show you like what is the experience and how it looks, in the Salesforce for the prospect when he clicks this. So unfortunately here I can't show you because this is the training environment of Pardot. Like I can't send any emails from here. But typically the user experience would be that, that this person who is going to get some informer newsletter email campaigns, welcome email and all the stuff, say he just wants to opt out of this. What he would do is typically You normally have a Pardot preference center here, but you can override with this link, which I showed it to you on the prospect record. And this is going to let him manage his own consents, which you are seeing on Salesforce, like these ones. So quickly, I'll show you that the thing is that when he clicks this, he's going to get a verified email from our product, which is Cloud Compliance, because we want to make sure that only the guy Aniket Save gets his, this individual gets the consent link, because we don't want anyone to manage other consents, and it shouldn't be, because since we are in privacy business. So basically, when he clicks that, you get an email in the inbox, which is completely, again, configurable, because you can, as per your company logos and standards, you can set your messaging. Like, this is the box you have to click and maintain your own preferences. So simply he clicks here. And now what Saurabh was showing you in the demo, this is the force.com consent center, which is there, which we have built. This is the one which we have bypassed your Pardot's preference center, the simple check boxes. Now you can see you have everything in a very rich consent center, which is directly talking to Salesforce. So the Pardot's prospect can literally give his consents, which are going to get synced to Salesforce first, and then come back to your Pardot. So that now you have a very unified consent, which is getting managed in the Salesforce, and your Pardot is automatically going to get these due dates. Say, for example, here this guy he sees that he's opted in both of the consent purposes, but he didn't like the email campaign. Then he can just simply opt out, and all he has to do is just save. And completely, this guy doesn't have any community license, so he's a lead basically. So you can use that to your advantage. So once he gives this consents, as you saw, it was earlier opt-in, and if I just refresh, you will see that this consent particular purpose will get opted out, because what you saw was completely on Salesforce. And now that you have opt-out, I'll just show you how the opt-out looks as in a date form. Earlier it was 2023, now it is today's date. So today's date means your opt-in basically has expired, so he's opt-out. So what is the advantage of doing this is, now, because this date is going to get synced to your Pardot anyways, like within 3 or 4 minutes, how you have your connection with Pardot, this guy will be pulled out of this, your dynamic list, here, because you have set it up in the future. And now because he opted out, this guy will be automatically pulled out. Once you refresh this list, I think it takes some time, 10-15 minutes, but that's how you can just pull out this guy automatically and then not fire him any emails to which he had opted out. For example, this one, inform on news email. So this is how your consents get synced in Salesforce, and all you're doing you're just managing in the Pardot. And the real advantage of having your consents on Salesforce is because since your consents are lying in the Salesforce, they can they can be synced to your downstreams, like some SAP or ERPs or anywhere, and you can always have these unified. Anywhere this guy is there, this consent will always be opt out, and you don't need to worry to get it from Pardot back to your Salesforce. Any questions here or any concerns? If you guys want to see again, I can show it to you.
Aniket, can you create an opt-in, like for the email that's opt-out? Can you just show how that works?
This one, right?
Yeah.
So simply, again, he logs in an email and tells your internal user, hey, I just want to opt in back. All you have to do is just create another opt-in and save it. And if I refresh, so as you saw, these consents are lying on a different object, which is Salesforce's standard object, but we propagate it to your lead, and it will be having another new consent value in future. And you can set this to 3 years, 4 years, 5 years by default through our product configuration. Yes, Saurabh. So you want anything else to be shown here?
Cool. No, yeah, I'm going to turn it over to folks on the call. Are there any areas particularly of interest, or does anyone have any question on how we are doing this? Shravanti, Anish, Ashish, Fasil, Pradeep, Sharanya, Suraj, Tunji. Do any of you have any specific questions on what you've seen so far. And we can also talk, I think somebody, Anish, mentioned about Marketing Cloud. We can also talk about any of that if you are looking at some other email technology or just have a question around any of this stuff. No? All right, so what we'll do is, we will record, this is getting recorded, so we will share a copy of the recording for anybody who's interested. And if you want to, forward it to your colleagues, your customers, whoever. If you have any particular questions for us, let me actually share my screen really quickly and show you a few more resources. So you can, read a lot more about, I think it started from the beginning. I didn't want that. My apologies. Let me go to all the way to the end of it. So you can find more information about us on, actually, this is not updated, but cloudcompliance.app/blog on our website. There's a lot of information on this. You can identify, how your organization can leverage omni-channel and comply in this manner. This is very important, particularly if if your company or if you're in consulting, if your clients are working with, some of the Asia Pacific markets or Europe or the United States, practically everywhere in the world in the next 2 to 3 years, I think a vast majority of nationalities will be covered by privacy laws. China has something that gets enforced, a revised version that gets enforced in September of this year. India's PDPB is going to come probably in the same time frame. It got delayed because of COVID. Otherwise, we would already see that. Obviously, Europe already is covered. So you definitely get that benefit. The other aspect of this is to determine the mix of these channels. So another thing that is very useful, particularly if you have Pardot, is Pardot is limited to what channels you can leverage from Pardot, right? You can't really do a lot of other channels outside of email, which is where kind of you use Marketing Cloud or something. But if you have Pardot and if you've added other app exchange, technologies or some other channel or outreach, then this solution works really well. It's also true for Marketing Cloud, Marketo, Eloqua type technologies, particularly the ones that are email only. Like if you use Marketo, you use MailChimp, right? It's email only. But by taking this approach and this solution, you can now leverage these consents for other channels. And reach out to us if you have any particular questions on it. Aniket is based in India. I'm here in Chicago. We are happy to get on a call. You can book time with us from our website, which is cloudcompliance.app. You can also reach out to me on saurabh@cloudcompliance.app and Aniket on aniket@cloudcompliance.app. I would also encourage you to connect with both of us on LinkedIn. I'm sorry, I don't think I have a slide for you, Aniket, on this. But we would
I've just shared the App Exchange link and my LinkedIn link so that anyone wants to connect. So everyone, it's available in the chat if you want to copy.
Cool. So if anyone has any feedback on what they've heard, if there's something that we didn't cover or things that we could do better, please either unmute yourself and mention it to us, or feel free to just type it in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with. I'm going to stop sharing and also stop recording here.